Hi, this is Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, the President, Founder, and Chief Listening Officer here at our network at USA Global TV and Radio. Thank you so much for your loyalty. Thank you so much to all of our guests, to our team members, to our sponsors, and to all of our elevated listeners. Here at USA Global TV and Radio, we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. We celebrate all of our team members, all of our guests, and all of our sponsors from around the world who come and lead their lives with their hearts to help other people walk into their greatness. If you'd like to be a guest on any of our shows, please go over to our website, usaglobaltv.com, and book your session. Please contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com and subscribe to our channel. Hello, everyone, and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and I really appreciate all the loyalty, all the follows, and all of the commitments that people have made to keep pushing our platform forward. As of today, we have a new number. In the last 28 days, we have over 70,200 views. So that's gone up from Sunday, which was 57,000. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I love the fact that we're providing content that you find educational, entertaining, and filled with hope and inspiration. Our show today is Food and Our Emotions, and our topic is the role trauma may play in food disorders with our special guest and team member, Jenetta Barry. Let's welcome, before we bring her out, the star of our show, Mr. Red.olaughlin, who is up way early for this show, and we really appreciate it. He's very actively involved with our platform as well. He is, in addition to being a co-host, he is a panelist. He's an expert presenter on Talking Heads, and he's one of our elevated listeners. And he's also my book coach and a dear friend. Let's welcome him to the show. Welcome, Red.
Good morning, y'all, or good afternoon, depending if you're in East Africa, which our other guest is today. And just another wonderful day here in paradise in the Houston, Texas area.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. And, we're talking about food, and I'm doing the intermittent fasting, and I'm hungry today, Red. And I know you shared before that it could just be dehydration.
That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. It's early in the morning, and chances are you may not be fully hydrated yet.
Yes, I think that's probably it. But, today we're going to be talking about trauma and food disorders. Is there anything that comes up for you in your experience working with people in your personal life, your work as a longevity strategist, that you want to share around this topic?
Well, I think culturally, you may have some options there too, because when you look at the Eastern philosophy, they don't care whether you have breakfast or not. It's not the most important meal of the day, which our American marketing, philosophy is that breakfast, that's the best, you break your fast of sleeping overnight. It's the most important meal of the day. But in reality, it's not. Most of the times you wake up, you're dehydrated. And as such, you also have to start developing a habit. First thing you have is your cereal or your eggs and bacon and coffee and everything else. And it just becomes a habit. You are forced into eating because that habit says it's, 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock, whatever time it is, and you're eating. And same thing with noon, same thing with later on in the afternoon. And so it becomes a habit. And it's also because that's our culture. But if you look at other cultures on the Eastern philosophy side of things, they say lunch is the most important meal of the day because that's where you have a chance to have a large lunch and have all day long to digest it. And then later on in the afternoon, evening, you have a lighter one. But if we take a look at our normal American culture, they have a breakfast, they have maybe a snack, they have a lunch, they may have an afternoon snack, they have a big meal there later on and maybe a snack after that. And so you hear these nutritionists say, well, 3, 4, 5 small meals a day are good for you. And I don't believe they are. They keep your blood pressure elevated. You don't need that, not blood pressure, your blood sugar elevated. And it just has a tendency to lead to diabetes and other problems. So why create a problem that you don't have to have? Because if you listen to your body, the hormones are going to tell you when it's time to eat, when to stop eating. But that's a different show. We're on emotional trauma today. And so let's go ahead and get our guest out here as soon as possible, Dr. JACALYN. I think that's the right thing to do right now.
Yes, absolutely. So, joining us is one of our dear team members who is also a co host, a panelist, an expert presenter on Talking Heads, an elevated listener. And she was ahead of the curve long ago before I was, in terms of using online platforms to work with people who are struggling with grief, with trauma. Let's welcome Jenetta Barry in the Epiphany Process, joining us from Kenya.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Can you hear me? Is there a bit of a delay? Do I need to pause before I answer? You can hear me. Okay.
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, here I am from Kenya wearing my leopard skin I was telling you about the other day.
I love it.
But jokes aside, it's an honor and a privilege to be here today. And I feel so passionately about this subject. And if it can make a difference to one more person after our show today, I believe we've done a really job well done.
Thank you, Janetta. Something I wanted us to start out with is, because we were talking about this backstage, is depending on where you are in the world, weight could be looked at in different ways. So here in this country, and I have to say that I fall right into the trap, is the obsession with being thin, the obsession with what the scale says, with how you look. And I've been spending my entire life hating myself because I'm never the right weight. But other parts of the world, people are celebrated if they have on a few extra pounds. Jenetta, tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I was doing this program with you today, I went and did some of my research, and I've been saying for some time that there wasn't an issue with overweight up until Twiggy and the 1960s, but I actually sit corrected, because in actual fact, being plump and overweight practically worldwide was revered. It kind of made for a lot of tribes and traditions and so on, was that it was a sign of wealth if your wife or wives or women were overweight, and it was very much sought after. And even if you look back into the Greek times and the statues of the Greek goddesses, they're all plump with rolls of fat on their stomachs, all those statues and so on. So it's been there for a long time that having a lot of weight on you is acceptable. And it appears that towards the end of the 19th century, that started to change, and having that one expression and long tapered fingers and so on was a sort of disempowerment of women, so that they became more of an object and didn't come into competition with the patriarchal way of being. And that continued right into the 1920s, where in the 20s women were stopping eating completely, or a lot, not completely, but really bringing themselves down so that they could be this chic 1920s person. So it didn't start in the 60s, but in the 40s, being a little bit more buxom came back in again. And then in the 40s and 50s, and then suddenly in the 60s with Twiggy, we went into being like insects. So that blew me away when I did that research.
That is really interesting. And, I think one part that we have to maybe turn over to Red is that being plump or overweight has major health impacts on our organs, doesn't it, Red?
Well, being plump, if you're only talking about a couple inches, probably not a big deal. Now, you have fat that's going to accumulate around the internal organs called visceral fat. You also have fat that's right outside under the skin, subcutaneous fat. And if you have an extra 7 or 8 inches around your gut, yeah, you might be having a problem. A lot of that is probably visceral fat, and a lot of that can be controlled, obviously, by diet. We mentioned it the other day, when you have a fatty liver, a lot of issues start to happen. So if you start accumulating fat inside your body, around your organs, yeah, there's issues that can happen. But like most everything in our life, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time, years in many cases. So you end up in your 20s and you're fine. Your 30s, you're kind of maybe an extra inch here. You let that belt out just another notch, and then all of a sudden you get in the 40s and it's 2 inches. You're letting in the belt out, and you're okay. I'm still doing all my exercise, but our metabolisms change. A lot of things change, and we don't keep up with the changes. We have a tendency to just keep doing the same habits we've always had. So over time, you get into your 50s and 60s. Now all of a sudden you're packing on that extra 30, 40, or 50 pounds that you didn't have way back when, and you can't get rid of it no matter what you try. And there are ways of getting rid of it, but we expect to get rid of it overnight, and those expectations are not met. So now all of a sudden we are, I'm not going to use the word trauma, but we have a depression, anxiety about this thing, and we got to go out and we got to work more in the gym. We got to watch what we're eating. And so we start changing our lifestyle to try to get that slim figure again. And we give up. Okay, if I can't do it, I might as well eat, because that's where my comfort comes from. And so we have a tendency to kind of roll in this circle of, I want to get thin. It's not working. I'm giving up, and I'm just going to eat and not worry about it. And that's when you start ending up, now you're in your 50s with that extra 40 pounds, and now you start having some health issues because of diabetes and cardiovascular issues and other things.
Yeah. I don't know, when I hear those numbers, they sound like big numbers to me, 30, 40, 50 extra pounds. Janetta, what about you? Can you imagine if you had an extra 50 pounds? That would be like if you picked up weight that weight, like the
No.
225 pounds, that's a lot of weight.
Yeah, it is a lot of weight. And I want to, what Red had to say then, it's just so spot on. And an extra part of that is that at some time or another in our lives, we all experience some form of trauma in some way, even if it's separation trauma from parents as a child or whatever it is. And what I've observed is that any of that emotion that's not addressed, we tend to bury it inside ourselves on an unconscious level. We don't even know we're carrying that trauma and that distress. And so the body goes, you need protection because you're not safe. And so the eating helps one to feel, at the time of eating, more comforted. I say it's very much like babies needing to suck to feel that sensory. It's got a lot to do with that side. And then you start feeling comforted that, and then when it's gone away, you want more of comfort. But at the same time, on an unconscious level, the body's getting you to build up fat around you. So if you don't feel very protected outside yourself, at least you feel protected emotionally and physically within yourself. And that's where a lot of emotional eating and a lot of emotional overweight appears to start stepping in.
Yes, actually, really, really good points there, Janetta. I'd love if you could walk us through the story of somebody has something happen to them, right? Something dramatic, something altering their life in a way, and they don't have anyone to talk to, or it's too painful to talk to someone like yourself, for example. And then to your point, they just start stuffing themselves with something because they're so sad, they're so empty, they're so hollow that anything they can do to fill themselves up. How long does this process usually take is the first question. Then I'll come back with the second question.
The process of doing that, or the process of getting through it?
No, the process of doing it. Is it immediate when something tragic happens or somebody experiences grief that they immediately turn to something for comfort?
Yeah, that's a good question. It can be, it all depends on the person and their metabolism and what the trauma is. It's not easy to give that an overall label. By way of example, when I lost Jenny to suicide, suddenly I ballooned out overnight, and I wasn't eating anymore, by the way, or I wasn't aware I was eating anymore because I was in such shock. So I have noticed that it happens in different ways with different people. Some people might find it starts building up. And by the way, you were mentioning about they feel isolated and alone. A lot of the time, why people do not turn to somebody else is because they perceive everybody else is managing and they're the only one that isn't, and that nobody would understand. And so that's when they'd either start binging, depending on the type of personality or what the trauma is they're dealing with, start binging, or slowly building up to eating more and more and more as they realize it's comforting them. It all depends on the person and the situation.
Thank you so much, Jenetta. And I have an experience with somebody that I had in my past where the person lived alone and the person actually had bags of candy hidden all over the house. And the person was by themselves. There's nobody else living there. And it ended up that a doctor said this person had food allergies to sugar and flour. And so I ended up going to a treatment facility where they specialize in food allergies. And I was part of this therapy group where, the family members and friends were asked to come along. And anyway, my question is it possible this person had gone through trauma themselves, but they were told that it wasn't because of the trauma, it was because of food allergies? Have you heard of anything like this, either one of you?
Usually, an allergy is something you avoid because you have some kind of reaction to it. Now, a lot of us have sensitivities to things that can create problems, gluten being one of them. That's a fairly well known one. But then again, you may end up having colitis, you may end up having a lot of other things, and so you avoid certain foods. We get a little depressed sometimes because we have an emotional response to whatever is going on in our lives, and stress is one of those. And stress releases more adrenaline, it releases more cortisol, and that's one of those, the chemicals that store fat. That's just one of those things in life that cortisol loves to do, and it stores it around your gut because you got 4 times more fat storing cells in those areas. And so if you're not burning off the fat on a regular daily basis, that extra fat is stored. And sometimes we get in those emotional nets that, and it could go either way. I mean, yeah, we may put some food on, we may end up losing a lot of weight too, because we just don't, there's no satisfaction in eating. A lot of times we eat because it satisfies us, but there are some occasions where, maybe loss of a loved one can put you just as much in the overweight situation as it could put you in the underweight situation, because people do, as Jenetta said, people are reacting differently, and as such, we end up in that situation where I don't want to eat. It doesn't taste good. And so you avoid it. And by that habit, day after day, you end up losing pounds, and now you're significantly underweight, but you look in the mirror and you don't see that. Your mind translates, well, that's fine. And so we end up in that vicious circle going the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's a great point, Red. Thank you. And Janetta, our topic today is trauma and the role it may play in food disorders. When we think of food disorders, what comes up for me is bulimia, anorexia, but is that actually the only two food disorders, or are there others that we need to know more about, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's the food disorder in the other direction where you overeat and the morbid obesity, and that's a disorder. So it can go either way. And those disorders definitely come from some sort of happening, trigger, perception, self-perception, perception of the world at large. There is a tendency, if you are an addictive personality, to more easily go towards one way or the other, either to bulimia and anorexia, or overeating, or whatever it is, and to morbid obesity. It all depends on what has happened and how easily you adapt to that lifestyle, and or that happening, or didn't adapt to that happening. And I've noticed that, and this has happened a lot of times, where a person, when I'm working with a person has lost all interest in life and doesn't see a way forward, often they're the ones that find they're disinterested in food, because there's almost I'm ready to give up mentality. So nurturing the body and protecting the body doesn't go in with that thought and feeling process. And then the ones that do want to go forward and have a reason to live but don't know how to, need to protect themselves. And I've seen this time and again in my work. The first time I saw it, it blew me away. How we're feeling about life depends on whether you want to eat or don't want to eat. And if you want to survive in the extreme place of fear, protection. And if you don't really want to go on and you've given up on everything that is of you, then the desire is to not eat and protect yourself.
Thanks, Jenetta. Red, would you like to weigh in on that?
I was thinking sometimes we derive pleasure in many ways, and for many of us, eating that texture on our tongue, the smoothiness, the velvetiness, the sugar release that happens afterwards. But some people with cigarettes, that nicotine takes that away, and they don't have that craving to eat. And then it goes to other drugs, and so you end up with, you're just replacing that sensory feeling in the brain with another source of whatever activates it. So whether it be cocaine or smoking or alcohol, and so we're not eating and we're still deriving that pleasure. And so that's one of those trade-offs we made. Now, is that a food disorder? Well, it's certainly a disorder. It's emotional issues. There's a lot of things there, but we choose, okay, well, 6-pack of beer, and then, well, 6-pack's not enough, because you don't get to that same level of mellow state 3 in 2 hours that you used to get to. And so you're developing issues that need to feed upon itself. And so I think that there are so many other interrelated things there. We're concentrating on food because that food gives us that sugar release that goes to the brain, and we start feeling so good about things, that euphoria. But sometimes we substitute that for other things. Now, I can say that, yeah, it's a disorder, absolutely. But we're concentrating on food and the emotions right here. And food is one of the major ones we have. And if we don't do that, then sometimes we look other places for that same euphoric feeling.
Yeah, I really like that. And I'll go a step further with that as well, in that when we're in the perception that something outside of us is the only thing that can fix us, we will reach out to things outside of us, like food or alcohol or drugs or smoking or whatever, or another person. It could be addiction to a group of people, can be an addiction, or to another person, whatever. Or it could even be to a way of life, a lifestyle addiction. Can be money too. So whilst that's happening, it's one thing addressing it on an intellectual level, and let's give you some good ways to not eat, or good ways to not drink, or and certainly places like AA or whatever, really, really helpful. But when you can get back into finding out how to replace or how to expand what you perceive is missing inside you that only outside you can fill, when you can find skills and techniques to bring back in to yourself how to feel fulfilled without that extra food or drink or drug or person or whatever. When you can do that on an emotional and a mental level, and the emotions and the thoughts are agreeing that, then suddenly there's not such need anymore to find something or believe that only something outside of yourself can fix you. And when you're in that belief, it leaves you empowered, because only something outside of you in your perception has greater power to sort you out. But when you can step into yourself and start empowering yourself with some very powerful techniques, suddenly all that outside of yourself is no longer so attractive.
Thanks, Jenetta. I have a follow-up question for both of you, and I'm wondering if anyone in the audience is thinking about this. Is it a disorder if you look forward to eating, or if you say to yourself, I'm going to treat myself later today, I'm going to have X, Y, Z, and you look forward to that all day? Is that a bad thing?
Might I suggest something, Dr. Jacqueline?
Sure.
Why don't we go ahead and take our food? Why don't we take our food break? Why don't we take our commercial break?
Yes, I'll be back.
And it gives us a chance to kind of formulate our answers, and we can come back and talk about that reward system that we tend to use with regard to food. So
I'm off.
That's a great idea. We'll be back in 20 minutes. We're taking a food break. No, I'm kidding. Okay. All right, we're going to watch 2 clips, and then we'll be right back. You feel so frustrated. Why won't anybody hear what you have to say? You're filled with anxiety. You feel so isolated and alone. You're desperate for a connection with someone out there in a world that just seems to keep rushing by. Stop. You have a choice. Learn how to listen at an elevated level through the power of listening educational courses available on usaglobaltv.com. A world where you manifest everything you need and desire through the power of listening. The Power of Listening educational courses are available today for you to feel and know you have connected and you have been heard through elevated listening skills. The Power of Listening educational courses and children's books available today on usaglobaltv.com.
Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Story Garden. Your host, Diane Boehm. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Diane Floyd Boehm tells wonderful stories that warm the heart, spark the imagination, and unite people and families across generations. For children, Diane's Harry the Camel connects with all of us who've ever wondered how different our lives might have been if only we'd been born something better, like a wonderful horse instead of an ordinary camel. In the end, we all learn along with Harry that there's nothing better than just being yourself. Diane's Little Girl in the Moon looks down on earthbound children and wonders if they know she's just like them. A story of love, home, and the bond between mother and daughter, its powerful theme that we're each of us different yet all of us the same plants a seed in children that promises to blossom within a loving and trusting grown-up. Diane's new biography, Rise, recounts the experiences of her grandmother, Ruby, to reveal the hidden strength of the human spirit. Ruby's story inspires all of us to become the best versions of ourselves. You'll find all of Diane's delightful books and much more at dianefloydboehm.com. Visit dianefloydboehm.com. That's dianefloydboehm.com.
USA Global TV and Radio. Our show today's Food and Our Emotions. I almost played Listening Lazies, but I couldn't do it to the two of you again. I just want to mention Listening Lazies is now available on all the major music platforms like Apple and Amazon and Spotify. So go download. Okay, we were talking before the break what Red so eloquently summed up as our reward system. Looking forward to eating something or drinking something at some point in the day, knowing that it's probably not the healthiest thing for us, but we deserve it. We want it. We've earned it. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think we get that from our parents, don't we? When we're small kids, okay, you do this and this and this. I'm going to, take you down to the ice cream place or whatever. We get those rewards, but we associate those rewards with something that tastes good, dessert, candy, Coke, whatever it may happen to be. We have those rewards that were kind of inculcated when we're young. And what do we do to our kids? We do the same thing. And so it just goes on and on. And so we associate, well, that reward. Okay, fine. I get this project done in time. Let's go out and have a nice dinner, and we're going to have a big dessert. And so we reward ourselves with the foods that we wouldn't typically have at home that are probably, 40,000 calories more than we would eat in a week. But we go out and we have ourselves a feast, and that becomes part of our enjoyment. I lived in Germany for a couple of years toward the end of the 90s, and I was on a Atkins diet kind of thing at that time. I have 0 carb, actually 10 grams of carbs a day at most. And I would look forward, once a month, every other month, I would go down to Italy, and in a 3-day weekend, I would gain 12 pounds, pasta and bread and everything. And 2 weeks later, it was all gone. But it was one of those rewards that I looked forward to. I could certainly have pasta and bread in Germany, but I loved the travel and going down and having it where it just tasted so much better. So rewards, I think, are a big part of our life, and we get it financially, we get it emotionally, we get it a lot of different ways. But food is one of those habits that we start learning from a very early age.
Thanks, Red. Appreciate that. Jenetta, what would you like to share on this topic?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point you've made, is that we are rewarded with things that aren't necessarily that good for us in childhood, and it perpetuates and carries on. Having said that, I don't think there's anything wrong in going, I'm really looking forward to supper, and tonight it is pizza. Because
I've got to go,
if you're
Jenetta,
doing it
sorry.
from a place of balance. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so if you if you're looking forward to a meal because you're looking forward to a meal in a place of balance, where it's like, oh, I'm doing this now, and my reward for a hard day's work is a really special meal tonight, but you're not in that place infatuating, not able to concentrate or think of anything else but that meal that's coming up, you're probably a little bit out of balance. So it's about understanding that looking forward to things and looking out for things as a reward has its place in manageability. When it starts taking over and controlling you, and you can think of nothing else and do nothing else, and then you probably end up going and sneaking a few bits of it before it's time, then it's possibly a good idea to find out what it is that you perceive as missing in yourself, that you need to have everything now, rather than in time gently step into the reward time of the day and enjoy it from an open-hearted appreciation.
Thanks so much, Jenetta. Really good points by both of you. I'm wondering if we can sort of narrow it down for people who are watching or listening. So when is it a problem? When is it a food disorder? Is it when you go to the doctor, you step on the scale and they go, oh, you packed on some extra weight since last year? Is it when you get your blood tests back and you see certain numbers are out of whack? Or is it just when it starts to preoccupy your mind, that you're thinking about it, to, like Jenetta, what you just said, you're thinking about it all the time? And if it doesn't fall into those categories, you're okay.
Well, one thing that Jenetta brought up that I thought was very interesting and very correct is balance. And sometimes we get in that hurry up mode where all you have a chance to do is grab something and go. And then the next day you're grab something and go. And all of a sudden you don't have that time to sit down and either prepare a meal and enjoy it. And a lot of times we just gobble things down. We don't enjoy the texture, those little the things we feel on our tongue, the things that are part of the food that we're eating, that crunch, those little extra things. And when you start bringing it into the situation of when does it become a disorder, I think most things in our lives don't occur overnight. Some do. Obviously, like Jenetta, the death of her daughter, suicide. That's an immediate thing. But for most of us, I think we're incrementally just kind of porpoising into a new world, and we never even realized we left the old one. And then all of a sudden, it's a habit. Okay, that habit is just incrementally changed. Well, the habit is incrementally changed again and again and again. And this habit may be, it's not something that's going to happen in 2 weeks. It's something that happens, as you say, through your 40s. Maybe it's a loss of a job. Maybe it's more kids that are added to the family. Maybe it's the expense of college. Things change, and all of a sudden our priorities, our focus, everything changes. And we're incrementally trying to balance our life to what we think we need. In reality, we're not really balancing anything at all. We're just coming to a new norm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Red. I know when I was growing up, food was a big part of our family process, get-togethers, big meals. Everybody sit and don't rush through the meal. I've shared this before, but we would go out to dinner quite often, and my dad would say, "We're dining tonight," and we would be there for hours, literally hours. Whereas some people like to gobble the food down. And now, at this stage of my life, there really aren't any family dinners. It's just me grabbing something within 10 minutes at lunchtime. And then dinner, I sit down, I have soup usually, and I'm at my computer working while I'm eating the soup. So it really has changed a lot. And but that doesn't mean I make the best food choices either, because sometimes I want that rice pudding. I want that Chardonnay. I'm having it. And I say to myself, you've earned it. And so that might be the wrong philosophy, but that's the way it is right now.
Yeah, I would say that so much of how we direct ourselves comes from a place, and I've said this many times on many shows here on this network, comes from a place often of fear and judgment. And whilst we're fearful of something, either of ourselves or somebody else or something else, or judgmental of ourselves or other people, we can be more superior and they're inferior, or they're more superior and we're inferior. So whilst there's fear and judgment, a lot of the decisions we take around bringing that balance gets severely. And the other thing that I feel quite passionate about, having been through extreme trauma a number of times. I was abused at the age of 7, sexually abused. And I know from that moment on, it had a profound effect on me. I became the skinny, bilinky child until I hit puberty, and then I battled with my weight. And I know it's connected to that. And I just wanted to say that in my observation of having lost Jenny to suicide, as I mentioned earlier, I went enormously fat. Just overnight, like that. I didn't even notice it was happening. In fact, my son Neil went, "Mum, you're wearing funny clothes for your weight right now." I was going, "Really?" And then I looked at him and went, "Wow, they're not looking so great on me at the weight I'm at." And I really battled with that, and I was not eating that much more. And then a year later, I went over to Spain to my very best friend, life friend. We grew up together, and she was Jenny's godmother. And in that time, I ate, and as you were saying, Dr. JACALYN, gently. Food wasn't gobbled. It was an art. She is a cordon bleu cook, so we enjoyed our food, and I ate probably 4 times more than ever before, and I lost weight. And I really believe that as much as we can have plans, and how important it is to deal with the emotions and the feelings and the thoughts attached to it, and to not be so attached to things and people outside ourselves, our metabolism changes when we shift how we're feeling. So my metabolism changed the moment I was in this extreme initial trauma of having found my daughter dead. And then a year later, when I was in this nurtured place where my best friend just was there for me at the first anniversary of Jenny's death, suddenly I was able to appreciate food, love the food, be nurtured, be in a place, and my body processed it and my metabolism processed it differently. So definitely from personal experience, our metabolism changes depending on where our judgments and our fears sit. And when that can all be encapsulated, this is where I've helped many, many people with eating disorders in my line of work. When they've changed that internal conversation, their metabolism changes as well.
Thanks so much, Jenetta. I want to just throw this out there, this word, and Red, I don't know how you're going to feel about it, but the word is menopause. Okay. Menopause. Is that a trauma? Is that because all of a sudden everything starts to change? Nobody hands you a book and goes, hey, when you turn XYZ age, all these things are going to happen. And that has a big impact on our emotions. And so the relationship we had with food before is not the same, because now food is like the enemy in a lot of ways.
Well, as Jenetta's mentioned more than a couple times today. Go ahead, Jenetta.
I jumped in fast. I so understand that, because 24 years ago, I had uterine cancer, and I lost all my reproductive organs and went instant menopause. And I believe that when we reach menopause and our metabolisms are changing and we're not needing A, so much food, and B, we're processing it differently, there's a grieving process there. There's a part of us that feels we've lost our womanhood. Our ability to be able to have the choice, even if we don't want any more children, that choice has been taken away. That choice of feeling feminine because our hormones are going the way we're used to has suddenly gone away. And there's a grieving process in menopause that I really think would help so many women in this day and age if they were to step outside of just treating physically.
Thanks, Jenetta. I agree with that. Red, you wanted to add something?
Well, Jenetta's mentioned balance a couple times already. And as we grow, we have balance, particularly in our teenage years and in our 20s. And then things start to shift a little bit. Your human growth hormone starts to decline, and other hormones also. We end up with lots of imbalances. And food has that tendency to balance us out if we're eating properly. But if we're not eating properly, we have a tendency to be deficient in this particular mineral or that particular vitamin or this particular amino acid or whatever it may happen to be. And so by the normal process of growing and aging, and we start seeing less production of this and less production of that, that imbalance now becomes an overriding factor in other things. And then we have that background thing that's going on in our emotions, our world, our stress, everything is happening. And we're now compensating for that by even overindulging in sugars and whatever else. So it's a balancing act, and we are not taught anything about it. We don't know anything about it. And unless somebody like Jenetta comes around that says, hey, if you do this, things are going to change a whole lot better in your life. But it's one of those areas where, number one, we're not aware of it. There's very little education out there. It's not something we want to go out and find on our own, because we don't even know we can find it. And so I think that's just part of the problem of growing up in our age. We have so much information out there right now that you can't even begin to digest it on a regular daily basis if you wanted to learn something new. And so it adds to the complexity. It adds to that incremental diversion from the norm. And then our bodies are not doing anything to help us.
Yeah, it's a 1-2 punch, so to speak. Yeah, I was also just thinking about the fact that as we do age and we have these ideas, this reward system ingrained in us. I've lived my whole life like that. Do this, get that, you know, do something, get a gold star. So what about the younger generations? From what I understand from speaking to different people who've been on this platform, they don't feel the same way, or they don't look at things the same way that we have in at our ages. And Red, as you know, we had a guest on here, Baraka Getz, and she spoke about the pleasure ladder. And the pleasure ladder, there are 5 levels, but the first is physical. It's that immediate need for something to make us feel better. And as you go up the ladder, it's more esoteric. It's more about gratitude and helping other people. And so when we live in that space, we're not as concerned with the physical needs. So how do we, as we age, how do we balance all that?
Most of us, we don't.
Good answer, Red.
Yeah, most of us, we don't. Again, it's awareness. If you don't, I mean, you know, like Maslow's triangle or pyramid, you know, you start out with the physical, the security and all that, and you get up to the self-actualization there at the very top. Well, the same thing applies in Braca's ladder. Those needs are fulfilled, and then all of a sudden, okay, what else is there? How many of us actually go out and ask ourselves, what else is beyond what I have right now? We don't. It's now some of us do. I got my degree, I got this job, I got, my kids are out and I got grandkids. But how many of us continue our own personal education and need to help others, the gratitude? Those are things that we see other people doing, and sometimes we do it, and most of the time we don't.
Yes. Thanks, Red. Jenetta, looks like you have something to say about this topic.
Yeah, that's such an interesting concept, because it feels to me like the ladder is a progression that many people go through in life. Your first needs as a baby is to be fed and changed and made sure that you're warm and safe. And then you carry on where you need to make sure that you eat and you've got a career, and especially with women, as they start getting towards their 40s, that spiritual side of that ladder climbing starts coming in and being more important. Noticed with men, if they're going to be spiritual, often it's very early on, and they get it more than women do. They really get that bigger picture. But it sounds to me like that ladder is very much what a lot of people go through in life as they change through the different phases of their lives.
Yes. And it's also when people start asking that question, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And what I've really taken away from this show today and from what you've both shared is that probably most of us at some point in our lives have struggled with our relationship with food. It's not as uncommon as we would think. We see the extremes. We see someone who's really thin or someone who's really overweight, but yet we could be at a good weight or a few pounds over or under and still have issues, because food is always present, right? Food we see it on the television. We don't see it here. We don't have any food commercials, but we see it behind us today, right? And by the way, we'll take food commercials if we have any food sponsors out there. But it is around us, and we get together with other people. And some of the reasons we get together are why? To share a meal, to celebrate over a meal, to go out to dinner, whatever the case may be. And it's hard to get away from it, but yet it is that mindset, that journey. If we think about Maslow, we think about the pleasure ladder, climbing up there, and maybe food doesn't have as much importance as it used to. But then we might also realize that we are not fulfilled. We didn't realize we went through our whole lives having a feeling and not knowing what it is, and it's that emptiness, it's that grief for loss of something, or the grief of not ever being able to follow our dreams because we were busy helping other people. We put our dreams aside. So I'd love to have you both comment on that or anything else as we close out for today's show.
I will comment on that, but one last thing that we really didn't even touch on today was food marketing of everything we see. You mentioned a food commercial. Well, you drive down the street, you smell this Chinese food or this burger or whatever may be out there in your neighborhood, and it just feels so good because now you're adding an extra sense. And so the marketing of food, and when you start tasting food where they put that extra little preservative in there to make it look good, to make it taste even better, to make it last longer. So that's another aspect of this entire uh, emotion and food that we're not even talking about. And so I would love to just keep going and going, but I see the clock is ticking, and I'm just going to turn it back over to Jenetta so she could put her last comments in.
Thanks so much, Red. And I think that would be a great idea for another show for food marketing and talk about how they reel us in. Jenetta, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, my feeling is that it is all a money-making scheme in a sense. I mean, even the way sweets are put together, they're brightly colored to make us feel attracted to what we used to be attracted to in, say, like that avocado behind me, or that strawberry or whatever. But it's an easier way to eat. And as Red was saying, with the colorant and the flavor, it's just so much tasty on the tongue. And then you put them all out at the supermarket checkouts, and everybody goes, oh yeah, that'll make me feel like I've got more energy or make me feel better or whatever. So that marketing plays a big part in taking what food is a part of life. I mean, the Muslims talk about breaking bread with you. It's a part of life. It's a very precious part of life. And when that preciousness is taken away for the sake of getting people to eat more and pay more and buy more, it'll distort the whole art of eating.
I love that, the art of eating. And, Janetta, what you said, something popped into my head, which is Easter's coming, right? And we know, at least here, you can go to the grocery store, and as we get closer to Easter, which probably is right after Valentine's Day, the way we work here for the market, you're going to see those pink candy bunnies and those chicks, the yellow chicks. They stand out in the aisle, and they're all garbage. Every single thing is in it, but yet we're drawn to them, aren't we? We're like, oh, that has to be something that's tasty and worthwhile. And meanwhile, it has, I don't know if it has anything that's actually natural in it. Do either of you know that?
It's all cardboard.
Yeah.
No, that's our culture. That's what sells. Supply and demand. That's what we see. They're going to put it out where you're going to see it, prominently. So that's our culture.
And Red, it's just I think really segues into what you're talking about on Talking Heads about toxins, because there are toxins in food, and I'm wondering, are these toxins making it an addiction for us, that in some cases that they purposefully put things in the food to make us savor it and make us feel like we have to have it?
Sugar
it is. It's not a 4-letter word, but it should be. Well, it's been another interesting show. Thank you both for being here today. And please, as we close out, let our audience know where you are on our channel, what you're doing, so they can tune in and watch. Let's start with Jenetta.
So on the USA Global TV and Radio Network, I'm on A Woman's Prerogative on a Monday. I would say Monday night for me, but it could be anywhere in the world for you. But Monday's A Woman's Prerogative, where we talk about matters, women, and thought-provoking matters. I'm on, I co-host with Dr. JACALYN, The Art of Mental Health Wealth, where we use art and how that can change one's approach to life. And I'm on Global Adventures, which is not a travel program. It's a program where people have traveled to places and had unique experiences and insights and spiritual ahas, and places that one wouldn't normally go to, that look really interesting and intriguing. And also, of course, I'm a talking head as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And also an elevated listener.
And an elevated listener, yes.
Thank you, Jenetta. How about you, Red? Where can people find you here?
On the USA Global TV and Radio Network, we're on obviously the Food and Emotions on a Thursday morning, very early time in Texas, 8 a.m. The few hours later at 1 o'clock my time, Central Time on Thursdays, we have the Wise Ones. Immediately following that, on the Talking Heads, where I'll make presentations. We're right now almost in the exact middle of the Toxins and Health. And then I'm also honored to be on Roland Friedel's Wild at Heart, which is usually a Wednesday early afternoon show. So 4 shows on the USA Global TV and Radio Network.
Thank you so much. And I congratulate both of you and thank you. I really, really do honor you and love you both. So we're going to close out right now with the music video. And I know you two can drop off, so you don't have to hear it again. But I just love this. People are reaching out to me and telling me, Jenetta, you just told me yesterday that the tune was in your head and you were bebopping around your house. So there is something about it. I
was trying to get into bed.
Like,
I was trying to get into bed and going, no.
Turn this off. So this music video that we're going to watch is called Listening Lazies. It's available now on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Pandora, all of the major platforms. And the artist is La La Music. And the song was written by Dr. Madeline Chan, Mariska Duprier, and myself. So let's take a look at Listening Lazies. It's actually part of a book, which is The Amazing Adventures of Lady Ella, the Listening Mentor, book number 2, Lady Ella's ABCs of Listening, which will soon be available in a coloring book, thanks to our lovely Diane Floyd-Bain for that suggestion. So here we go.
When we speak, we don't hear. It's abundantly clear. Listening lace is creeping, and nobody's gonna win. Look someone in the eye. If you don't, they surely will cry. You don't hear a word I say, 'cause you always look straight away. Listening laces drive people crazy. Listening laces making us blue. Listening laces, communication goes hazy. Listening laces, listening laces. Da 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 da. Listening laces drive people crazy. Listening laces making us blue. Listening laces, communication goes hazy. Listening laces, listening laces. When you interrupt your friend, you will surely have to make amends. Lady Ella knows the way to help you listen better every day. And what's that? It's listening laces. Ba-da-ba-ba. Listening laces drive people crazy. Listening laces making us blue. Listening laces, communication goes hazy. Listening laces, listening laces. Listening laces drive people crazy. Listening laces making us blue. Listening laces, communication goes hazy. Listening laces, listening laces, listening laces.